Welcome to the Vintage Computer Festival East. I'm your host for this segment, Dr. Guillotine, and I'm going to be talking about online systems, otherwise known as Sierra Online. And we are going to be talking about a little bit about the history of their software that they developed and the games that they developed, as well as the IBM PC Junior, which was the system that really took them to put them on the map, but not really made them financially successful. So the story starts with Ken and Roberta Williams meeting and falling in love. That's a great start to a fairy tale. And what happened was Ken was a developer, a computer programmer, and Roberta would follow him around to the different jobs and got involved in tech as well. And one day he brought a game called Adventurer, written by Scott Adams, and she fell in love with the game and played it all the way through and wanted more. And she decided that she could write her own story. And the first game that was developed was called Mystery House. And what it had was graphics, which is the first game with graphics adventure game with graphics. And the way that they were able to create this artwork and input it into an Apple II system was using a VersaWriter input device that allowed her to take her simple artwork and put it into the Apple II and allow Ken to write simple code that was very small and fit onto a disk for release. And the second game coming out after Mystery House was this one right here, Adventures in Serenia, which was first known as Wizards and Princess. IBM renamed it. We'll get to that in a moment. But I kind of want to tell you why I'm here. I'm not an expert of this, to be honest with you. So why am I here? Well, it's really luck. 2 weeks ago, on Facebook Marketplace, I'm searching for video games because I like to collect them. I'm into collecting vintage games, into computers, and that's how I came to this festival. And I saw this image with a bunch of other games, about 15 of them. So I went on and I sent the message saying, hey, I really want to get this game, how much do you want for it? The lady says, make me an offer. I said, $80. She said, no. She said, I got 6 more boxes of this stuff, and I really want more money. I said, well, okay, what's the number you want? She didn't reply to me anymore, but I'm a persistent guy, and I knew that she was blowing me off. But I had a second account on Facebook for my product, Guillotine MMA. So I logged in, and I sent her another message, is it available? She didn't know it was me, she replied back. Basically, I made the deal at $200. I drove 250 miles. I went, I grabbed the games. I come back home and I pull out this one here. And I had no idea really what it was. But I posted a photograph with the King's Quest on the Big Box PC Game Facebook group, which is an amazing one, by the way. If you're into Big Box PC games or PC games in general, I highly recommend you sign up for that account. And when I posted the image, all of a sudden, world famous collectors are sending me messages about it. I knew I had something. Did a little research on it, and I found out that this was actually the second game that Roberta Williams created, which was Wizards and Princesses, but it was rebranded IBM and renamed Adventures in Serenia. Why is that? Well, we got to go to 1981, when IBM launched the PCXT. And they're all business with the IBM PCXT. But they're noticing computers like the VIC-20, the Commodore 64, the Apple II, people like to play games. Because you know the old saying, all work and no play makes Johnny a dull boy. So we like games, and they saw money in games. But instead of creating brand new games, they decided to go to different people and have games ported, especially off the Apple II. And one game in particular was this one right here. And it was, they approached Ken and Roberta Williams, and they said, can we make a deal in launching a video game on the IBM XT? They make the deal, and as you can see, this is actually a complete specimen here with a beautiful, I'm very lucky to have it, including all the warranty cards and stuff in here. But basically, the gist of it is, this was rebranded by IBM to sell video games on the IBM XT. As they developed the relationship with IBM, which they nicknamed BFC, and I'm sure you know what that means, big effing company, they were telling them about another system that they were developing, codenamed Peanut. and that is the IBM Junior that we know today. And they wanted a game that was more advanced than this to launch as a launch title for the IBM PC Junior. It had to have more advanced graphics, colors, sound, and more playability and replayability, which is important in a game. And they made a deal in order to launch this game. But what it really did, it saved Sierra Online, which was named Online Systems at that time. They were in financial trouble because they invested heavily in the video game sector of cartridges, the cartridge base. So in 1982, there was a huge collapse. They were financially in trouble. They were going bankrupt. IBM paid them advanced royalties on this games that they were developing. But what they also did, because they were being sued by the government and were having an antitrust lawsuit, so they weren't able to sign an exclusive deal with IBM. IBM purposely said that this cannot be exclusive to us. And that allowed a window of opportunity that we're going to discuss later on. So Sierra launches the King's Quest. Let's take a look at this for a second. If you know anything about the game, this cover will confuse the crap out of you. Though you play a knight, you look nothing like this character. And I gotta say, in the beginning, the artworks were all designed by Roberta. I'm assuming IBM graphics department was involved in here. I mean, look at this box, it's so boring, but I still love it. I mean, just the way it opens up, it's super interesting to me. It's totally IBM corporate, but yet it's got a little splash of fun. I mean, you got a red label over here. I mean, how cool is that? But what else we got in here is a keyboard overlay that goes on top of the IBM PC Junior keyboard. Now, why do I bring that up? This is actually not the first edition game. This was released in 1984. But if you look into the history of King's Quest, it was really released and developed, the first edition, 1983. And we have here the original keyboard that was launched with the IBM PC Junior. It's a chiclet keyboard. I don't have that overlay for that. I wish I did. Feel free to donate to the museum at the Vintage Computer Festival. We'll definitely take it. We'll get a keyboard overlay that goes on top of the chiclet keyboard. But people didn't really love the chiclet keyboard, and this was discontinued. But what I just found out today, because again, like I said, I'm not an expert, but I'm surrounded by experts, was they used the same internals for this keyboard and just added new keycaps. And here we go. It's a little mushy. If you know anything about the IBM XT, it's a much more clickier keyboard with a tactile function. This one's a little mushy. And that's because they basically just used the same one from the chiclet underlay and just replaced the keycaps. And then we have the overlay over here, which is much more simplified for the 1984 release of it. So what happened after the IBM PC Junior launched? Did it make Sierra wealthy? No. It just saved them from the initial royalties that they got, or the initial signing of the contract. The royalties didn't come because the IBM PC Junior is considered a failure commercially. Now, I'll argue that this system is a successful system. Reason being, I think that the graphics are fantastic. I couldn't believe how fast it loads up. So this must have been great in 1984 to have such a fast loading system, and 16 color graphics and the sound capabilities that it had, and the expandability with the side carts and the different things that you're able to do with it. So I thought that was really, really a successful computer overall, but financially, not so much. So what I just learned today was, in 1984, in Christmas, they discounted the system for the holidays, and when they did, it completely sold like hotcakes. But by this point, they thought it was going to be a flop, and they were just trying to make them fly off the shelves, close out the inventory. They stopped production. Then they realized they had a winner on their hand. It was too late to go back into production of the systems. And they just used it as a bait and switch technique to sell the more powerful IBM XT, or the ones that they were continuing production with. So then what happens? Well, Tandy, which is a Radio Shack company, basically, I'm going to say they stole the technology, they stole the architecture, made one little switch on the audio. I'm hearing that you take a soldering iron and you do a little this and a little that, and you all of a sudden have a Tandy computer, or you could take a PC Junior, turn it to Tandy, vice versa. You can go back and forth if you wanted to. And the Tandy was a success, huge success for Radio Shack. Why is that important? Well, we'll go back to that licensing agreement I was talking about. They didn't sign an exclusive license agreement, meaning they, Sierra Online, they didn't sign an exclusive agreement, so now they were able to market King's Quest for Tandy. They changed the artwork, they changed the box, and they relaunched it, and it became the goose that laid the golden egg for them. They became very, very successful with it, sold tons of titles, and have a huge history. I have a ton of games that I brought to show off from Sierra Online, and was very, very successful then on. And that's kind of the legend of King's Quest. Started off as a text-based with a little bit of graphics adventure, launching on the IBM PC Junior as a commercial disaster, and then becoming a huge success with the Tandy 1000, the Apple IIc, and the rest is history. So I think now, why don't we boot up the game and see what it's like? Now, in all honesty, I have not played this game. I've played some of it in the past. As a child, I'm totally aware of King's Quest, but I was more of a Space Quest guy and Police Quest and you know, some of the other Sierra titles, like Leisure Suit Larry. I mean, come on. We all played Leisure Suit Larry. And those were more the titles I was familiar with. I was more of an Ultima guy when it came to fantasy. King's Quest is more like a fairy tale, and I was more into like Dungeons and Dragons. But I still love the game. So let's boot it up and see what it looks like. Let's turn on the monitor, and boom. And I think the part that I really love is how quick this computer actually boots for 1984. Let's give it a little moment here. Is that too loud, you think? Wow, look at that. We're already at the screen. Press the button and the game begins. That was it. But it was, I mean, 1984, you got to imagine that this was something that nobody's ever really seen before, this kind of colors. They used to fake colors on the Apple II with dithering, and you can only have a very limited color palette. But here we have full 16 color graphics, and as you can see, the game looks, I think, really cool. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Now, what's really interesting is that if, you know, you start walking, you don't turn, you're dead already. I mean, come on. Roberta was relentless. Relentless. She was absolutely relentless with the deaths, and Sierra was infamous for being very difficult puzzles to solve. You literally had to read literature in order to understand some of her puzzles and trying to solve them. Again, I just wanted to kind of turn it on. I'm not going to play the game, but just wanted to show you a little bit about it. And let me see if I just turn down the volume a little bit here. Yeah, so it's a game that requires you to actually use text in order to play it. So as we're walking, we can control the character with the keyboard. Also, I believe the joystick works. Did it plug it in? Yeah, we're having a little issue with the joystick, but I believe that the joystick does work for this game, but you can't play the game with just the joystick, because once you get to the door, I mean, how do you get in using the joystick? You don't press the button to get in. You're going to have to actually type in. So right here we have the command line down here, and we're going to type in open door. And I believe if you don't use those exact words, you don't go in. So that can become kind of difficult when you're trying to solve puzzles, that you have to be in the mind of Roberta Williams and Ken Williams and understand what they want you to say to the game in order to get it to work. But look at these graphics. I mean, I just love it. I mean, back then on the Commodore 64, everything was kind of brownish. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Commodore 64 fan. But to me, like, this game loads quick and looks gorgeous. I wish I had a little bit more sound. That's the one thing the Commodore really definitely was very successful with that SID chip. But here we are, and we're going to get points Let's see, how do I stop? Stop. All right, how about bow? Can't do that from here. All right, guys, I don't know how to stop here. Is it enter? Nope. Anybody know how to stop? All right, anyway. You guys get the gist of it. It requires commands in order to play the game. Good looking game. I think it's wonderful. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the other games that I brought with me. And here we go. So let's talk about Ultima for a second. The reason why I bring up Ultima is that Richard Garriott launched Ultima, and I heard from Ken that the one person he wished he could continue to work with was Richard Garriott. So if you see, this is actually labeled Sierra Venture on it, because this was a Sierra Online release of Ultima. So what happened was Richard Garriott and his brother had a business meeting with Ken Williams and was able to negotiate that they developed the game with a box, with a cloth map. These are all expensive items to add, but these feelies made their game very special. And they also got a very favorable royalty deal. And when IBM did go to Sierra, they wanted something similar to Ultima, which again is a game that I was more fond of for its Dungeons and Dragons style of play, and the fact that it had this open world style. And when Richard Garriott launched Origin Systems, he left Sierra, and Ken feels pretty sad about the fact that he couldn't continue to work with him because they went on to do some really great things. Another game that Sierra launched, and this is probably the one that I was most familiar and loved, was Space Quest. Woo! Space Quest 1, and I got this black box edition of it. Super, super rare. First edition, Space Quest 1, black box, love it. And this was a very successful series for Sierra. They had many other titles throughout the years that really took them to places that I wish I went as a company. Selling hundreds or maybe millions of copies of games throughout the years. And over here we have the rest of the games that I brought, but the one in particular, just give me 1 second, I'll grab it. This is one of the later releases here, is Gabriel Knights in the origami box. Pretty rare, expensive game to acquire. Also a Sierra title. So they worked with a lot of different artists and were able to, do things that were legendary in the industry and historic today. I'm sorry that they don't exist anymore as a company. I believe Activision purchased them out. But I'm very, very lucky and fortunate to have had them in my life as a gamer. It definitely shaped me as some of my comedy, some of the storytelling. I just love what they've done. And that's kind of the gist of it, guys. I guess I'm going to show also here. I went a little out of order, but they also had a couple other titles on the PC Junior that were cartridge based, which is kind of neat. So if you look inside here, they didn't just have diskettes, which made the PC Junior kind of different, that it also had cartridges. And I'm guessing that was influenced by the video games companies like the Ataris and the Commodore with the VIC-20 and the Commodore 64. Everybody wanted to have cartridges. There's not many titles that are cartridges for this system, but Sierra Online did make a couple of them for the IBM PC Junior. And I just thought it was interesting that they changed their name around that time when they worked with IBM, because originally they were called Online Systems. And I guess when they moved into the Sierra Nevada, they decided to rename their company Sierra Online. All right, guys, there's not much more I could say about it.
So we're going to open it up for questions in a minute. I just want to really just show some of this collection here. So this is kind of cool if you're really into like Sierra stuff. So
the Space Quest 3 has the mask in it. It's unpunched, so that makes this particular copy pretty rare because it's complete with the little unpunched, ridiculous mask with the pig nose, which is kind of the inside joke of the designers. So that was kind of neat. I was lucky to get that one. And you know, collecting games is fun. And another thing about collecting games, playing games, is that I remember my parents used to give me a hard time whenever I'd play games on computers. You know, when something is fun, you want to do it. So I learned computers by playing games. And for me, it was an important part of my education. I wasn't a book reader, so I would play games like Ultima to help me read and write, because I have to take notes and things like that. So I really don't think downly on people that play video games, especially as a 3D modeler and using these 3D games. Designing in 3D is pretty much playing video games. So that's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of the games. And it's just fun and nostalgic to see and touch these things that have been part of my life as a child. Ultima in particular, you know, had a real huge impact on me. And of course Space Quest and all these other ones. And to go find these games in the wild and get them, it's an adventure. You know, just when I got this King's Quest, I literally drove 250, I don't drive 250 miles for nothing, but I went for these two games in particular. It's just wild to me. And how much time do I need more?
No, we're really just opened up for questions, but you know, I have a few questions myself. So at the time, so back when did you, like you said you were really into all these, so were you playing them on a Junior, or did you mention, or you were playing them on a 64, or what were you playing all these games on yourself?
That's probably one of the reasons why I didn't play King's Quest 1 was I didn't have IBM computers until later on. I was more of a Commodore 64, Commodore 128 guy, and this game was too advanced graphically and code-wise in order to run on those systems. I only got into Sierra games once I got an IBM compatible and started playing Space Quest and Police Quest, and that's how I knew about Sierra as a child, as a company.
Okay, so you matured and determined that you grew away from the Commodore into a real machine like an Amiga.
I really wanted to.
I'm waiting for the pitchforks to come out now and come after me.
No, Amiga's great though.
Yeah. So it's really an amazing collection, and you know, I personally am not someone who generally collects video games. I happen to have some, so it's really interesting to see. And I didn't realize, you know, some of these games that I probably threw out when I was a kid, or maybe had an illegal copy, were, you know, are worth so much money now. I think
it's unbelievable how much some of these things go for.
So I would advise everyone to take care of your boxes.
Yes.
So don't leave them in your basement.
And don't leave them in the sun because they do fade. Like, so this Gabriel Quest faded a little bit from the sunlight. Whoever had this on a shelf, bookshelf probably, with sunlight, and you don't want it to fade. So you want to keep them off out of the sunlight, and definitely want to preserve it maybe with an acrylic case, or magazine bags is a good way to also preserve them.
Wonderful. Yeah, I do keep documentation, so I tend to keep them in acid-free stuff, but I guess, you know, it's hard to kind of fit them in those kind of things. So we do have some questions that have come in. So Amiga Bill, I think, wants to know, are you going to play through King's Quest now that you have a copy?
Absolutely. We're gonna, and maybe Amiga Bill can join me and we'll play it together, because I would love to go through the whole game and play it all the way through and be the first time experience playing the game. So
another question that's come in, do you have any tips? Apparently you've got a great collection. Do you have any tips on kind of where you can find this stuff, and you know, because it seems you've been finding some really interesting things, and you know, do you have any tips? How do you find this stuff? Where do you get it? You know, it's great.
So a wizard never shares his secrets. Okay, no. The best place I find gathering large collection of games at one time for good prices is Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Craigslist is a little slower, so it has less action. Facebook Marketplace has way more action, but you got to be quick because everybody's on it and everybody's looking for it besides you. Another tip is you got to be constantly looking. Don't give up hope. Just keep searching. But here's the real thing. I live in New Jersey. New Jersey is, I think, a tech center in some regards, especially back then. You had Commodore that was in Pennsylvania, you had IBM was here, you had all these different companies, you had New York City, and people loved to buy technology back then and have these collections. So if you're out somewhere in Minnesota or somewhere, you're not going to find it as easily as I am, these collections. But don't give up hope. Keep looking and be willing to go 250 miles to go pick up a video game. And yeah. Also eBay, but eBay is also nicknamed ePay. You're gonna pay some bucks over there. You're not gonna get big collections. You're just gonna get items to fill your collection. So is there anyone that I have here? Yeah, so my Ultimate 3, I did get that on eBay. But be careful because there's a lot of scammers and you wanna be careful. I find that Facebook Marketplace, when you meet the person, it tends to be a little bit more authentic, and you know you're not buying something that's a knockoff.
Well, we hear you're kind of like the American pickers of the Amiga users group, so we know you have some skills at this and some good luck. Another question that I guess people are asking, I guess Telemonster asked, so do you, when you play these games through, do you use the cheat books? Do you have the matching hint books to get through all these? Because I know when I was playing these games back in the 80s, I had all the cheat books because let's face it, I hit the snake in some of those things and I can't get past it, and I had no patience, so I had to cheat.
So I had a bulletin board system. I was part of the Humble guys with LSD and the Slave Lord, and we had a network of message boards. A lot of the tips I would get were actually in those early message boards back in 89, 90. I definitely needed the hint books, especially the Sierra games. Ultima and these other games, I would take notes and just like I said, it helped me read and write as a child because I was forced to having to take notes on these games. But definitely needed the hint books. And when we do this playthrough, I'm going to keep a walkthrough. I'm going to try to play it without the walkthrough, but I will keep the walkthrough next to me just in case.
Well, thanks very much. We've really kind of learned a lot about how we can find this stuff, because that seems to be the question we get from a lot of people. Is, wow, that's an amazing collection. How do you find this stuff? And it's just amazing to see. And and I'm so happy you were able to show off the PC Junior, kind of the most underrated computer at the time, because everyone makes fun of it, but at the same time, Coleco thought they could make a machine. And theirs failed as well. So
this is the first time you're using it, and I'm very impressed with the system. If I had this in 1984, I'd be bragging about it. I'd be showing it off to my friends, and I'd be very proud of it because it is a very capable machine. And it's a shame that it goes down as considered as a failure, but not in my heart. In my heart, this is a successful machine.
Well, thanks very much, and look forward to seeing you at future VCFs.
Thank you very much, guys. Looking forward to being here and doing a lot of things with VCF. I love you guys. Thank you.